everybody, and welcome back to Flock Talk. Long time no see. I figured we would try to kind of ease back into the swing of things here by doing a little bit of a simpler video on just some of the more uncommon or perhaps unusual things that I do with my birds. I do find that as a whole, the parrot community tends to be a little totalitarian with how they think you should or should not be interacting with your birds, or things that you absolutely should be doing with your birds, and you're the devil if you don't. So I figured it might be a little bit beneficial to kind of talk about the things that I do with my birds that maybe aren't ideal or don't fit in within that perfect little construct of how you should be taking care of your animals according to the rest of society. I just figured it might be a little bit eye-opening for those of you who feel like maybe you aren't doing the best that you possibly could for your birds, or don't feel like you're living up to some particular standard that the invisible world has decided to put on place for you. So let's get started. All right, so the first less than ideal thing I do with my birds is I don't really use their cages, and it is entirely possible that they could be out interacting with one another when I am not presently in the room staring at them, supervising every single interaction that they have. Now, this doesn't mean that my birds are carelessly left alone, unattended all the time, and if they get into a fight, something bad could happen, but it does mean that I might leave them in this room and leave every now and then. And what I mean by that is that my birds do still have cages. They are mounted up on the wall, but those cages only really get used when there's times where I'm absolutely unable to be present in supervising them. So times when maybe I've completely left the house, or when I've gone to sleep. Those are times when I might separate my birds, because if they did happen to break into a fight, God forbid, I would not be there consciously able to help separate anything that could be going wrong. However, I'm not always in the room supervising my birds when they're out in here together. I do have other animals, and they do need to have out time in the house as well, but this bird room is a nice way for my birds to be able to get all of that out time, all that social time, being able to stretch their wings a bit more without needing full access to the house, so I'm able to give my other animals their care that they would need, being out and about and exploring and having their social time as well. Now personally, obviously I don't have an issue with this, otherwise I wouldn't be doing it. If I felt that my birds were going to be in any sort of imminent danger, I wouldn't be doing this with them, or I wouldn't be trusting them with that sort of privilege to be able to be out all the time. However, because I am right outside the door, my house is very small, it's only really one level where we sit and have good times, I can hear them anytime something's going wrong. If a fight is going to break out, I'm going to be able to hear it, right? They're parrots, they're loud. If a fight is breaking out, I'll be able to hear it. I can easily pop into the room and see what's going on. However, honestly, that hasn't really happened. There's nothing to the extent of a full-on fight happening. Otherwise, my birds would not be allowed to interact with each other one-on-one. The second devilish thing I do with my birds is I let them eat off the floor. Now, because they have a bird room, it's a little bit of a different setup, obviously, than eating off of a cage floor. But parrots, and these two particular species of parrots, are ground foragers. Naturally, they do like to peck around the floor and explore, so that is a behavior that they naturally want to exhibit. So every now and then, when it comes to foraging for their food, I will scatter the pellets on the floor and let them go around and nibble and eat. Now, obviously, this could be risky if you're doing it in somewhere like a cage where your birds are pooping on the floor all the time, or it's not getting cleaned frequently, and then it becomes a risk where it's a health hazard because now your bird is eating off the same floor that there's poop on, and yada, yada, yada. However, with my birds and the way that I have my bird room set up, all the ropes are just on this side of the room, and then on this side of me, it's basically completely empty. No poop or anything really ends up on that side of the floor, and I do clean it twice a week at the very, very least. So when it comes to me scattering food on the floor, I don't personally find it problematic for me to be doing that with them because it is clean on that side of the room. I clean it quite frequently. It's a natural behavior they want to exhibit. So every now and then when I'm feeling a little bit lazier when it comes to their enrichment, I will just scatter the food and let them eat it. Branching off of that somewhat similar topic, the third kind of unusual thing I do with my birds is I don't actually feed them out of bowls anymore. I used to, and I did do that for a very, very long time. However, since we recently had Newt's vet visit and it came back that he was a little bit overweight, we decided to start shifting from using food bowls to actually having every single pellet and seed and whatever else my birds are eating scattered around the room in various foraging activities. So instead of having an easy to access bowl, their food will be hidden inside toys, it'll be scattered on the floor, as I mentioned earlier. It can be just about anywhere, so that way they have to search and find. Now this obviously can be tricky for some birds. If they have not been exposed to foraging before, you don't want to go ahead and just toss all their food around the room and hope that they'll be able to find it, because they obviously haven't learned how to do that yet, and you could end up starving your bird. I did introduce this concept extremely slowly with my birds. They had a bowl available as I gradually transitioned them into the idea of searching for their food. And this was something they've been doing for a really long time with their seeds and treats, so it wasn't really too difficult to transition them. And this has honestly been a really big game changer for my birds, honestly, because now instead of just giving them a bowl of food and they finish it and then they're bored, now they're getting so much more active, they're having so much more fun, they're exploring their room. I'm coming in every day to shreds and bits and pieces of toys all over the floor from them exploring their environment and having a bit more fun with it. So it's something that works really well for my birds personally. It may not be ideal for every single bird in every single living situation, but it's what I do with my guys and they seem to really enjoy it. The fourth kind of weird thing I do with my birds is I don't actually buy them new toys all that often. A lot of their toys are either handmade or they're reused, or I implement toy rotation instead of having to buy them new things every week. Parrots obviously are extremely intelligent species, and as a result, they tend to need a very frequently changing environment with lots of different toys, lots of different textures for them to explore and have a good time. Otherwise, you'll start facing issues such as plucking or other depressive behaviors that can be quite detrimental to your birds. Now, that doesn't mean my guys don't get enrichment. Obviously, there's tons of toys scattered around, but instead of having to buy a new toy every week or having to buy a new bulk set every single time I need some more toys, what I do is I do a bulk purchase of toy parts. I have a bunch of toys I've collected over the years, and I rotate them out. So I have a bucket of toy parts that I can use to make new toys if some of mine are getting a bit too chewed up and need to be replaced. And then I also just have a bucket of used toy parts that I rotate out frequently. And then about twice a week, I'll do a rotation of the room where I'll move a couple toys around, change it up, so the environment's a little bit different. So they're still getting that variety, they're still getting a lot of change, but it's not costing me an arm and a leg in order to give them that sort of variety and enrichment that they would enjoy. All right, number 5 is a bit of a cheat one. I don't change out my birds' bath water every day. They do have free access to a bathtub all the time, so if they want to have a bath, they are more than free to do so. But instead of using a bowl that would need to be changed out every time it gets dirty, I personally use a cat water fountain that has a nice deep bowl for the birds to be able to bathe in and a quiet stream. So if Newt in particular here wants to get under the stream and wiggle around like he does with the sink tap, he can do so. Now this I don't change out every single day. I usually only change it out when I notice it gets dirty. But because of its placement, it doesn't get dirty all too often. It sits underneath the birds' cages. So there isn't really anywhere for them to perch above it. The only way for mess and debris to get in that water bowl, or that fountain, I suppose, is if they're actually sitting on it and putting stuff into it or pooping into it, which again doesn't happen very often because they'll just fly over there to bathe and then leave. But when I do notice it has a bit of a mess, then I'll do a full scrub clean out. Otherwise, about once a week, the whole fountain is getting dismantled, scrubbed clean with soaps and all that good stuff, and the filter gets replaced. All right, so the final thing, and what I probably consider to be one of the more controversial things I suppose I do, is my birds do not get annual blood tests. They do still go in for their annual exams, although I will say in this past year they did not, because my veterinarian was not open for people to be able to go in with their pets, and I didn't feel comfortable just tossing my birds in there and hoping for the best with them. I do prefer to go in there with them. So just out of the sake of like their stress levels and stuff, I didn't take them to the vet in this past year just because of those COVID restrictions. However, every other year, my birds will go to the vet and get their physical exams, at which point our vet will say either they're doing great or some things are looking a bit off, and we evaluate from there. They have both had rounds of tests done before. Mia, when I first brought her in, had liver disease, so she had to have some blood drawn so they could check and confirm that diagnosis. And Newt, just a couple years ago, it must have been about 2 years ago, had to have his blood drawn just as a good baseline because he was a new bird to our flock. We like to always get them checked out, make sure they're all good and healthy, that there's nothing going on. And through that, we were able to see that his calcium levels were a little bit low and make the adjustments that we need for him to be healthy. Every subsequent year after those initial blood draws, though, we just go off of what our veterinarian recommends based off their physical exams. Now, the only reason why we do it this way is because of the size of our birds, especially Mia. Mia weighs 28 grams. The amount of blood they're actually allowed to draw from her is so small that there's either very few tests you can actually get done with that amount of blood, and that amount of blood that they can take is super risky to her health. If they take a little bit too much, she could die, and that's a risk that honestly does not outweigh the benefits for me in that situation. Newt, was very borderline. So when we got him, he's right on that cusp of being small enough where it could be risky, big enough where it's a little bit more okay. So initially we were going to be doing blood tests on him every year just to get that good baseline, be able to make sure that all of his levels are in balance every year. But when we had his blood done, when we had initially moved to Winnipeg, Newt ended up being a little bit dramatic with it, and he had to go and sit in an incubator for a while because he did not react well to having his blood taken. So because of that response that we saw from him that one time, for me personally, it's not worth the risk to keep trying and keep stressing his body out like that every single year. So instead we got that one round done, we got the information we needed, there was nothing majorly wrong, just some tiny corrections, and now we just go off of his physical exam, knowing whether or not he's doing well, or if there's any changes that need to be made. If any issues arise with our birds, where they're suddenly not acting right, then we'll have to reweigh those risks again and decide whether or not it's healthy for them to get their blood drawn in that situation. But for the most part, we just go off of their physical exams and our veterinarian's recommendations, fecal exams and things like that, instead of getting their blood drawn. So I think that honestly, they're cuddling. They're cuddling. Oh, come on, we saw you guys. Don't pretend like you're not in love. All right, but that about does it for the 6 main things I suppose I do that the internet may find a little bit more controversial that I do with my pets. Yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Obviously, I'm always open to criticisms, and if there's anything I'm doing with my pets that are actually going to be detrimental to their health or where the risks don't actually outweigh the benefits, I would of course love to hear it. There's always opinions and recommendations of things that I haven't actually heard of before or hadn't considered yet. So of course, I'd love to hear your guys' ideas down in the comments below. But otherwise, I'll leave that there for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.